We have come to the end of the first day of questioning of Richard Walton at the Undercover Police Inquiry. He will be back tomorrow in the afternoon to continue his questioning. We went through in a tremendous amount of detail about his involvement in the meeting with HN81 and the resulting fallout from that, the documentation that resulted from it, his statements to the Ellison review, which he attempted to relitigate. It was put to him that he was remarkably uncurious for a detective in terms of his lack of questioning of exactly who HN81 was and what he was doing. He was forced to admit that had he known the detail of reporting on the Lawrence family that HN81 was engaged in, it would have been entirely inappropriate for him to have the meeting. But he claimed there was nothing wrong with the actual meeting. It was all the problem with the meeting was the write-up afterwards and what was extrapolated by that. I'm joined by Alex from Campaign Opposing Police Surveillance and Evelyn from the Undercover Research Group. What did you make of this last little bit of the session?
Well, it was excruciating detail, but I think that, the council was very good. It kept going back to kind of re-emphasize the point. Walton's claim all the way through is that he was asked to go to this meeting. He didn't know what the meeting was about. He didn't know where the meeting was. He wasn't sure if it was Bob Lambert's house, although everyone always has said it was in Bob Lambert's house.
He brought it up repeatedly.
This is an important point. Was it in his house or not? He didn't know what groups the spy cop he was meeting was targeting. He didn't ask during the meeting what group they were targeting. He claimed that it was unimportant, and the UCO would never say what group they were targeting, which is like nonsense.
Contradicts the evidence we've heard numerous times.
Loads of times. We've read thousands and thousands of reports and seen lots of them give evidence. He wasn't curious about it, and he didn't learn anything from it at all. It was a completely useless meeting. This does contradict quite a lot of what he said in the Ellison review 12, 13 years ago, and he is backtracking on that. Given that it has dogged his career and ever since and ruined his police career, I can understand that. He's trying to salvage what's left of his reputation, but he does make himself look a bit thick.
He embarrassed himself. When it was put to him that he wasn't curious for a detective, he said, well, nobody's perfect.
Yeah, he was a detective and working on intelligence. So what do you want? It's good to also emphasize that even in his interviews with Ellison, he changed his story so much that he was referred to the IPCC, who, after an investigation, thought he was an
untrustworthy witness.
Yeah, and should he have been in the police still, he would have a case to answer for. Fortunately, he retired the day before that became public. Defending himself like that, the day of my retirement was 30 years in the making, so it had nothing to do with that. Well, this is the kind of slippery way that he seems to be finding an answer to everything, an explanation that does make sense on the face of it, but in the greater context is nonsense.
Yeah, he kept having layers and layers of denials. He didn't know that it was Bob Lambert's house. He didn't know that HN81 was inside the Movement for Justice. He didn't know that HN81 was reporting on the Lawrence family. He didn't know what the meeting was for. He didn't know if he was there to give a briefing. We had more interventions from Mitting, and Mitting was like, well, what were you there to do? He said, I thought it might have been that they wanted a briefing from me on institutional racism, because that's what I was working at the time. And he was like, why would an intelligence officer want a briefing from you on I don't know. It wasn't necessarily a rational thought. But the point I'm making is there was so many layers of denying that it's like he protests too much. It's that thing of like, if your mate says he can't come to the pub for one reason, fair enough. If he says it's for 4 or 5 reasons, it's like, you just don't want to go, man. You just don't. You're hiding something. Come on, get out of it. And I think we really got I really think that Richard Walton embarrassed himself quite significantly, particularly at one point where he was falling over his words. He was getting very red-faced. As you said, this particular incident has incredibly damaged his policing career. Which, well, he was a very senior officer at one point. He was put in charge of domestic violence for the Met. I mean, like, you know, incredibly high ranking. And this particular thing kind of ruined it for him. He's now going around hawking his services to private companies in terms of intelligence. Which, I mean, if you want to check out his website, I mean, he looks awful. I mean, he looks like just some really cheap backstreet spiv. So I can understand why he's so annoyed about it, but the fact that he is still failing to get his story straight on this matter, and like you literally, like, every time it was mentioned that it was in Bob Lambert's house, I didn't know that. It's like, yeah, okay, you have. I mean, repeatedly, Tim Salisbury had to say yes, that we have taken that on board. You know, it was, it's very clear that, you know, he's protesting too much. He said, I remember distinctly coming away from the meeting thinking, well, I don't know where that undercover officer was deployed. So that's a sign that he was definitely not told.
No, and also, I read a statement the other night, and that starts with, like, I want to make a point about that meeting in Lambert's house. It didn't mean anything, but the only thing that happened is that it became a story afterwards, and that came to haunt me. And he wanted to set the story right there, but he just fails to do so. And at the very end, maybe he said, yes, had I known it was like an officer in Black Justice campaign, undercover officers infiltrating Black Justice campaigns, it may not have been such a good idea for me to go there, especially if, and that's what Mitting emphasized at the end, like, he was setting up sort of the answer of the Met to solve issues with racism and everything. Like, if that would have come out in those days, that would have been, like, even, you know, apart from the Lawrence review team, that would have been a disaster and would have caused riots.
I mean, I remember that time, and it was a very explosive time. And, you know, the inquiry was very high profile. Like, if it had been exposed at that point that this was happening, that an officer, part of the response to the Met's response to the inquiry was meeting an undercover officer spying on those campaigns, yes, it would have been explosive. It would have been absolutely, you know, sensational news. And even now, he doesn't get that. He kind of changes his story quite a lot. But even at the end, he was saying, you know, well, it was still justification for the meeting, although he didn't know what the meeting was about.
Yeah, and it's like, it's another sort of missed chance, like with so many of the other witnesses. It's like, on reflection, so many years later, you've got nothing to lose anymore. Some reflection, some sort of hindsight. Sort of, yes, it was wrong. Yes, it wasn't a good idea. I shouldn't have done it. You know, he's clearly hiding something, and there's more there, and he's just not going to say it.
Yeah, I mean, he came up with some real banalities of, like, it was just a normal day. After the meeting, I went about and had a normal day. And he's like, there's a real sense of, like, injustice in his voice when he talks about it. That somehow that he was, you know, this is unfair. This is not right.
He's very bitter. He's very bitter, personally bitter. I think about what happened to him.
Yeah, I mean, he considers
stamping his feet as a 2-year-old.
Yeah. Once again, we're having a special branch officer at the undercover policing inquiry portraying himself as the victim in all this, because somehow his career was damaged in some way by the results of his own actions. You know, I mean, it's petulant and childish, and he embarrassed himself again. I mean, there will be further questions for him tomorrow. I think it's highly unlikely, given he's appeared so many times to answer questions on this very topic, that there will be any change or we'll see any contrition from him tomorrow. But I mean, I would advise, I mean, if he is watching, to really consider, that you have one opportunity tomorrow to try and kind of salvage some part of your personal self-respect, quite frankly, and kind of reflect a little bit on exactly how you've behaved. I mean, it is deeply pathetic.
Sure, and yeah, you can, you know, like, we went through his career at the start of the day, and he was clearly, you know, someone on fast tracked. You know, like he was literally on the fast track. Yeah. So some people saw potential in him, but he was like, I suppose he was just as slick and sort of glibbery back in the day, and that was mistaken for intelligence.
Well, I suspect. I mean, like, I do read the notes of that meeting, and I know Lambert lies like a like he breathes. But like, what I suspect is that both Lambert and Walton, and maybe to some extent HN81, are there trying to impress each other. You know, it does read a bit like Walton's going to that meeting going, yes, I'm in this team. I've got the ear of the commissioner. You know, this is gonna brief high policy, and you know, he's trying to kind of impress because he's trying to be Billy Big Bollocks basically. Lambert's always trying to be Billy Big Bollocks. So like, it's like people kind of swaggering about, and this kind of, we've got more influence than we have. And, you know, obviously the SDS and Special Branch are trying to sell this meeting as something vital. But the flood of evidence, this flood of things in the statements, in the investigations, in the way that people write things, clearly there was more SDS going to this team, whether it's going to Walton. You know, he was clearly, they were sending evidence to them, and he is denying that, and he's just trying to cover that up. And clearly that evidence was coming to their desks. It's just, it's not true to say there was one meeting and I didn't think anything of it and that was that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that September minute from Colin Black, where he refers to reiterating to Walton about there needs to this intelligence needs to go no further, that he was being given ad hoc briefings, multiple, that would, and he would not be receiving anything on paper. You know, I mean, like writing down that someone's not going to receive things on paper because I mean, like honestly, they're like a parody of themselves sometimes. Yeah. I mean, it really just, I mean, it just showed that there's obviously a great deal more going on. He was very adamant this was the only meeting he ever had. I don't believe him for a second. I think that off the cuff, off the record meetings were happening quite regularly. He was clearly, before they opened that file, which became the conduit, that was clearly was brought in order to replace what had been an informal conduit between that unit and Special Branch. And he was that. And I think anybody looking at the evidence would kind of surmise that as being what was actually going on. He was a Special Branch man who was put in specially in order to, particularly because the lead of the Stephen Lawrence review team did not have clearance and was not able to see any secret reports. And secret reports were obviously going to be part of the intelligence process. So they had to have a Special Branch man in there somewhere. And the fact this guy who just come off the fast tracking accelerated promotion course being put in there, it all makes sense that that's what was going on. He's in huge denial about that, and I don't think we'll ever get him to be honest about it. But I think anybody watching has very much got that impression. We've had some comments. There's one here. A real slimy shitbag, Walton, and that's saying a lot given the barrel of rotten apples he's in. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think he really, he has been, he's come across as slime, quite frankly. It took a while to get rid of the grin off his face. It did disappear by the end of the day, but there was a long time it was there. Another comment, same person. I'm glad Richard Walton's not been given a definitive time for continuing tomorrow. These grubby lying pigs need to be messed around more, whether intentional or not. Yeah, absolutely. We have no idea how long Helen's hearing tomorrow will be. Helen Steele will be returning again for I think what will be her fourth open hearing, and she's had numerous closed hearings at the inquiry. This will be looking at the Operation Muscat, targeting for her search for John Dines and her travels in doing that, and eventually kind of catching up with him. I think that I would recommend tuning in for that. I think there's some of the more significant stuff that we will hear at the inquiry during this phase, and I should imagine it will take the majority of the day. So it could be the case that Richard Walton will be waiting around all day, waiting for his executioner, and then it may be that it's right at the end of the day, or perhaps has to be put off until another day. I really don't know. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean, it's been, I think this morning with Richard Walton was quite difficult. The evidence was very slow. It was really just trying to establish that who he was working for at what time, and it was very difficult. But I think as the day wore on, we got the payoff for that. We got to kind of actually why what he did was so objectionable and why it was so inappropriate. And I think credit to Tim Salisbury. I don't think he's necessarily always been remarked upon as one of the counsels of the inquiry, but I think he did a good job of drawing out the for just how awful Richard Walton is as a person, and what a liar! What a liar he is. I mean, that was the conclusion of Ellison. He took real umbrage with Ellison Review, and it was like this. He claimed that it was important that the inquiry overturn the findings of the Ellison Review. This is not here to do. That is not part of the terms of reference. Basics.
He just said, like, the first time, my first interview, it was like 60 years ago. I had to remember. I didn't know quite. And apparently, he then walked home, as he said. And thought, oh my God, I said the wrong thing, I'm just gonna
not told the truth. I must go back and tell the truth.
Farcical. Is there anything else either you'd like to add?
Nope.
Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again tomorrow, as I say, with Helen Steelgate. We'll be starting at 9:30, which means the broadcast will start at 9:45. Please tune in. Thanks to everybody who's liked, shared, subscribed. It makes a big difference. And thanks to everybody who's donated to the Ko-fi. I think the website's down at the moment. It's been shared a lot today, but I can't take it.
We were trending on Twitter at the
it was actually. It was. I
don't know how that algorithm works, though, whether it only shows for us.
Who knows?
Anyway, it made us happy.
Yeah. Bye for now.